People don't need a favor. They need an opportunity.
Little helps them, but this could drop to Molango. First seconds, he scored!
I come from a family where being a football player is not a source of pride. An agent actually comes and says to me, I think you're a good player and I want to bring you to Barcelona. So yeah, I made the commitment to study, which I did. And I did actually did 2 degrees. I did law and political science. I don't really believe in a career plan, because if I say I want to be the CEO of Real Madrid, yeah, but there's only one. On your first day in English football, on your full debut, you play away from home and you score after 12 seconds. So I thought, listen, I've got a choice here. Either continue being that journeyman, chasing a dream which was becoming less a tangible one, or I just bring this to an end and give myself a chance to maybe do better. A lot of people don't know is that when I started working for Baker, I was from Monday to Friday working as a lawyer, but then I had accepted the role as a scout. So obviously, when the American came and looked for someone to run a club in second division, they ended up kind of offering me the role of CEO and I joined Real Mallorca. One of the projects I'm the most proud of is the launch of the PFA Business School, 400 plus players registered. This goes from, Ilkay Gundogan to Jordan Henderson to Johan Wissa to Tyron Mings. I was able to end my career on my own terms.
Welcome to Power and Purpose with me, Leon Mann, and Will Troost-Ekong. Maro's on England rugby duty, so won't be with us for this episode, but we do have a brilliant guest joining us in Maheta Molango, Chief Executive of the Professional Footballers Association. From scoring 12 seconds into his Brighton debut as a player to leading the world's most powerful union, his story is one of transformation, resilience, and excellence. He grew up in Switzerland, has played football in Spain, Italy, and England before retiring and going on to become a sports lawyer and the CEO of Real Mallorca. And then in 2021, he became the CEO of the PFA. Will, we got a special guest on this week. What are you looking forward to speaking to Maheta about?
I'm really interested to hear Maheta's journey from being a journeyman player across different leagues to becoming CEO of Real Mallorca and now CEO of the PFA. I think it's a journey that not a lot of us know about, but I think his inspirational story is also part of his purpose that drives him now to create a pathway for ex-professional players or current professional players to also explore the world outside of their small bubble and round football that they're always chasing. So, really, really interested to hear more from him and how he'd found that transition and also all the great work that he's doing with the PFA now, which is helping not only players like myself who might have featured in the UK, but also many, many other players transforming their life and progressing into the next phase of whatever they want to do next.
Okay, cool. Let's welcome Maheta to our Power and Purpose community. Maheta, welcome to Power and Purpose. We really, really appreciate you making time to join Will and I. Where are you in the world at the moment? Because I know you spend a lot of time traveling up and down the country and around the world visiting your members.
Now, today I'm in sunny London, so probably very close to where you guys are. Well, not Will, but where you are, Leon.
Yes, absolutely where I am. Certainly not where Will is. Will joined us in the last podcast from the south part of Africa, and you're now in the north part of Africa, and you've dressed for the occasion, Will.
Yes. So excuse my work attire today. But yeah, no, of course I had to make time for it. We seem to always catch each other when we are away with the national team. So I'm in Morocco at the moment. We have World Cup playoffs coming up. Maheta said that he would wear his Congo shirt if he would have known before, but we'll save that hopefully for the final of the playoff. But yeah, no, absolute pleasure to be here. And I really look forward to hearing more from Maheta and about his story.
Amazing. And so Maheta, we can't wait to jump into your career and exploring the impact you've made. But what we wanted to do is we like to get to know our guests and let our community know more about our guests' backgrounds, how they've grown up, etc. So we'd like to start at the beginning, your early football journey. So I don't know if you can tell us about growing up in Switzerland and your early football influences, because I don't think I've ever been able to ask you that question previously, but I'm really interested and curious about where your football journey began.
Well, I would say that it certainly not began by my father or my family pushing it, because I come from a family where being a football player is not a source of pride. My father was the typical Congolese African father who above all puts education. So when you go and tell him about football and those type of things, it's not really something that sounds quite well, if I'm completely honest with you. So I was actually playing football because it's one of my dear friends who dragged me into football. And what happened was one of those stories that only happened in football, which is I was playing amateur football in Switzerland in the third tier, and one day an agent actually brings a Brazilian player on trial at my club, and it was like one of those rainy day. I mean, it was just not a nice day to play football. And after the session, actually, the guy comes and says to me, I think you're a good player, and I think I want to bring you to Barcelona. And I said to him, I'm not sure you understand that I am actually paying to play. They don't pay me, I pay to play. I think you must be talking to the wrong person here. And the guy insisted, in fairness to him, and he said, no, listen, I really think that we can do something with you, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really give much, kind of credit to what he was saying. The bottom line is, a couple of weeks later, he came and said to me, let's go and have a trial at Atlético Madrid. And, I was 18. I had just finished kind of my Mann studies. And therefore, as far as my dad was concerned, I actually could go, always making the commitment to actually continue studying. So I just went, did a trial. And again, you go from being an amateur player in Switzerland, paying to play, and all of a sudden you do the trial and they sign you. And they gave me a 2-year deal. And that was really a game changer for me on the football level, but also on a personal level, for a young kind of lad to arrive in Madrid in 2001. It was an amazing kind of opportunity for me on a personal level and obviously on the football level as well.
And how did you convince your dad? What did you say to him to get him to allow you to go to Spain and pursue this curiosity around football?
Well, I think that for him it was about kind of making sure that I would study. But I think again, this goes back to the values that you've got at home, no? And I think he was always someone that ultimately, knew what were the red line that he definitely wanted me to be able to kind of navigate within, but gave me the tools to be able then to make my own decisions. I was fortunate to have parents who ultimately have given me as much as they could, but always ultimately leading up to me to do what I thought was right doing, and I think my commitment to him was that ultimately I knew what I was doing. I knew that football was hopefully a great dream to pursue, but ultimately not forced to be the plan A. The plan A was very clear. I would continue to study, and he knew that it wasn't because he would be forcing me to do so, but because by then I had this as part of my kind of, my brain and the way that I saw the world. So yeah, I made the commitment to study, which I did. And I did, actually did 2 degrees. I did law and political science whilst I was playing, which was an interesting experience, to travel back and forth for the exams, etc. was interesting.
So where were you studying at the time? Were you studying online, or was that a time where you were, like you said, you were traveling to do the exams? How did that look?
No, so what happened was that I actually met my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and we met at uni. And what happened was the first 2 years, I was going to class whenever I could. And then when I went and played in Germany and then in England, what would happen is that she would actually be sending me all the notes and all the books. And I would just study on my own and then just travel for the exam. So in the January session and the June session, that was what I'd be doing. Instead of going and enjoy myself, I would just travel back to Madrid and do as many exams as I could.
Wow, that sounds like a different kind of off-season as I normally hear from players and understand. But yeah, no, that's amazing. So were the clubs at that time also accommodating that? And if you were saying, okay, I have to study or I have to go to certain exams, or was that something you really had to organize outside of what they expected you and also paid you for at the time?
No, I mean, look, Will, that's one of the reasons why, in my current role at the PFA, I would really push for to do something about that, because there was a complete kind of lack of understanding for what I was trying to achieve, and it was a fight, to be fair, to get some time off from the managers that I had at the time. They wouldn't understand why would you, there was this mentality about focus on your football and don't get distracted. And I remember even with teammates at the time, because, at that time we were still sharing rooms. I know that it sounds like archaic because nowadays everyone after COVID kind of sleeps on their own, but at that time we're sharing rooms. So I remember kind of an away game in Germany where, I was trying to explain to the guy next to me that I had to study for an exam, and we're playing the game at night, but the following day I need to travel to Madrid, and he wouldn't understand. So I had to decide to go to the bathroom and actually kind of study from there, So he was there watching TV, and I was there just, for a couple of hours studying on my own, just because he wouldn't understand that he had to turn off the TV, So that was kind of the environment in which, I had to operate at the time.
That must have required such a level of discipline from your side. And I'm also interested to understand your mentality whilst that was going on. So did you feel it actually liberated you to feel like you could perform better, like you didn't feel desperate that football was the only option you had, as I also experienced with many of my colleagues in clubs and also the national team, is that a lot of the times the boys that I've played with, now men, often didn't have a chance to have a good education or further education. And it's always like a do or die situation. They feel like this is their everything they've got, and they have to make sure that they protect it with everything they have. And I must think that if you have the opportunity to also study and prepare for life beyond football whilst you're playing football, maybe it gives you a sense of freedom and liberation of knowing that, okay, I can perform and do my best and pour my heart into this passion. But like you said, you have a plan B that is already there and ready if you need it at any moment in time.
I think that's absolutely right. And ultimately for me, it just meant that I was able to end my career on my own terms. I was just able to decide when, it was time for me to move on. And it also helped me just accepting that maybe the dream that I was pursuing ended up being a situation where I was a bit of a journeyman. That's the reality of my career. And I think what it meant was that when stuff on the pitch were not going the way that I wanted, I had another kind of area where I could perform, where I could feel valued, and I could feel that I was getting kind of the moral boost that we all need. We all need to feel that we're good at something, and as you know, Will, sometimes football can be tough. There's no other job where you prepare for a show the whole week and then you get to the weekend and there's someone deciding whether you're gonna get on stage or not. This doesn't happen in a normal kind of work. And I think those ups and downs, I think you need to have a point of stability. And in my case, it was the fact that I had the chance to meet other people, I had the chance to talk about other stuff, and I had the chance to have a solid plan B, but equally to have a purpose. I think it is also about having a purpose whenever we decide to bring kind of this amazing and privileged journey, which is football, to an end.
Amazing. And of course, we love
Maheta,
talking about the purpose side. And sorry, Leon, just to jump in here. But I love to understand how your purpose might have changed over the years. I presume when you were 20, 21 in Madrid, and you have this opportunity of a lifetime that got presented to you maybe unexpectedly. And like you said, afterwards, being a journeyman, playing in many different clubs, different leagues, something I can also relate to. I'm interested to hear if there was a specific point where you said, okay, I felt like my purpose really became clear, or there was like a shift in your mindset to say, well, actually, I want to carry this beyond and maybe affect the game in the way that you are doing now, and growing into the position of, all the things that you've achieved now, and being a leader in that sense.
Sometimes it's also about the opportunities that cross your path. I don't really believe in a career plan. I'm not one of those who think, this is my goal and I need to pursue that goal, because I think that if you do that, you automatically set yourself up for failure in a way. Because if I say I want to be the CEO of Real Madrid, yeah, but there's only one, and therefore the chance of this happening are limited. So I believe more in a situation where I almost have I've got my fridge, and I pick up different ingredients along the way as I progress in my journey. And then those ingredients at some stage will enable me to one day cook one thing, or the other day cook another thing, depending on the opportunity that crossed my path, So I think I've always been very busy in trying to fill that fridge, with as many ingredients and of a different variety and different things that would then enable me to cook different things and then build a career that wasn't driven by this is my goal, but rather those are my ingredients, and let's see what I'm able to do at different stage, depending on what the opportunity that presents itself. Then it's up to you to make your way to the box. If you stay in midfield, nothing will happen. So it's for me to get into the box and create those opportunities. But then then being flexible as to what type of opportunity you want to pick up. I never thought I would end up leading a union. That was never the plan. It's just that opportunity crossed my path. And at that stage, because in my fridge I had being a journeyman and having kind of suffered the ups and downs of football, because subsequently I became an employment lawyer, which actually fits for what I'm doing, because the Premier League is so cosmopolitan and I had traveled. So you see where all of a sudden that opportunity across my path seems to be matching with all the stuff that I had accumulated in my journey, but it was never in the first place the goal in itself.
Amazing. I love that energy, and you're an amazing chef.
I'm sure my wife would say otherwise, but yeah.
Well, you've got a lot in your fridge, Maheta, anyway. I was curious, Maheta, about you as a player while we're talking about this now, right? So were you a captain while you were playing?
No. I was not a captain, and whereas I was always academically quite good, I was very, very, very stupid on the pitch. I was very limited in my understanding of the game. So this really triggered in me like a lot of thought in terms of what intelligence actually means. We have this perception that intelligence is only kind of being able to get good grades. Well, in my case, I had good grades, but I was not intelligent on the pitch. And I think I've learned to value a lot the intelligence that players show on the pitch. Because in my case, it wasn't that I was forcibly missing in physical ability or technical ability. I was actually okay. It's just that my football intelligence was very low. I did not understand. I did not read the game well. I did not understand the game well, and that's why I think is Messi a great player? He's a fantastic player, but Messi is what he is because he's very intelligent. Because he's able to park himself in the right place in the pitch to receive the ball with an advantage, because he reads the movements of others better. He's got this spatial awareness that very few people have. So it made me think a lot about that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that later in the conversation. But I think even the way that then, we went about recruitment, I placed a lot of importance to stuff that I knew were my limitation back in the day, and I saw how the difference between a player in the third tier and a player at the top tier is not forcibly technical. It's not that. It's more that the guy at the top delivers on a more consistent basis and makes better choices and more consistently. I don't know what you think, Will, but that is one of my main takeaway in terms of what I've seen in football. No, those guys at the top basically make better choices more consistently. And in general, their performance is more stable. The more average one go from 10 to 6 to 5 to 8. At the top, they are 7, 8, 7, 8 out of 10. Boom, consistently, no? So yeah, I thought a lot about this kind of academic intelligence versus, football intelligence.
So Maheta, what would you say the leadership traits you did take from playing were? Because I'm sure that there were things you learned about leadership on the pitch that you've taken forward to, and as we'll talk about shortly, lead major football clubs, lead the biggest, most powerful sports union in the world. So are there things that you took from playing that you can say, well, actually, this shows up in my leadership now?
I think what you learn, one of the things that you learn in football is that players would respect when you are straight to them. Even what you say is not what they want to hear, and they're gonna be annoyed at first, but they respect when you tell them the way the things are, and when you are direct and we don't go around the thing. And I think you learn that in the business of people, understanding those type of things is very important. And I think what you also learn, in football is that ultimately your success typically does not depend on the 11 who play. Those guys, they're fine. They're okay. The success comes from what do you do with those who do not play. How do you keep everyone reasonably unhappy? And I'm choosing my word carefully. It's about how you keep them. Can someone be happy if he doesn't play? No, you'll never be. But how can you actually make them see the bigger picture? Make them. And I think that with today's generation, unlike my generation where for me it's just the authority. If my dad said A, it was A. And if I had the idea of going to B or C, he would quickly remind me that it was A, and I would just follow. Nowadays doesn't work like this. Now you need to bring people on a journey. You need to convince them. You need to give them the bigger picture. And that's one of the things that I took from my kind of playing days, into my whatever leadership role that I've had subsequently.
And Maheta, before we move on to Maheta, the leader off the pitch, which will be the focus of this podcast, I can't not ask you about this, because reading through your CV, I need to know about your Brighton debut. What happened on your Brighton debut?
Well, it's a summary of my career, Start very well and then disappear.
Right, you need to pad that out for us. You need to explain to those listening.
Well, again, one of those incredible things where, on your first day in English football, on your full debut, you play away from home with Brighton at Reading, at the Majeski Stadium at the time, and you score after 12 seconds. In fact, my wife missed the goal because she was busy doing something else. And all of a sudden, before she knew, everyone was saying, "Yeah, your boyfriend scored." And I scored after 12 seconds on my debut, in England, in the championship at the time, playing for Brighton. And it was just amazing. And everyone thought I'd be the next Bobby Zamora. And before you know, after 6 games, I was not even on the bench. Those things, that happen in football.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that, Maheta. I absolutely had to get that into this podcast, because when I read that, I was like, I have to ask you about that. But we're going to move
I think I must still be the foreigner that scored the fastest goal in England. I think that's my only claim for fame.
That is a major claim to fame. Absolutely. So that's Maheta, the player. Now we're going to look at Maheta, the leader. And I thought it'd be useful for us to start in your journey into sports law, because you've referred to it in terms of your journey into becoming a lawyer. How did you find that transition from, playing into sports law?
It's I think it was just, again, recognizing, being very honest with myself. So what happened was that my contract in Brighton came to an end. I think it was February. We came to an agreement. I left. And then tried to look for a club, didn't quite get what I wanted. And then, at that time, I just finished my law studies. So I thought, okay, let's just see how my CV would be received by law firms. So I just started sending my CV to different law firms. And I was fortunate enough to be hired by quite a good kind of law firm called Baker McKenzie, which is one of the leading kind of law firm, US law firm. And I joined them in April, thinking, okay, I'm going to join them. And then depending on how it goes, I may just kind of go and find another club in the summer window. So I joined them, and quickly what I realized is that my boss at the time was, I think, 32 or 33. He was making a fantastic living, but not for 8 or 9 years or 10 years as we would do in football, but for the foreseeable future. And even if he retired, he'd continue benefiting from the client that he brought. Second, in that world, all of a sudden, it's not like in football where you can be, a top guy, and the next day you can be out of the squad, and the following day you're up again, etc. In that job, you move up, and then you don't move down. You move laterally. So you get to that stage, and then you continue being that partner at a law firm, but just maybe at a different law firm. So, and then all of a sudden I realized that, in my ideal world, I would play until 35 or 36, and then I would transition smoothly into being a lawyer, and everything would be fantastic. But I realized that in real life, if you're good, at 32, 33, you can already be, at the top level, no? So I thought, listen, I've got a choice here. Either continue being that journeyman chasing a dream, which, that at that stage was becoming less a tangible one, or I just bring this to an end and give myself a chance to maybe do better of the field than I would have done on the field. And I just quit. So I literally quit from one day to the other. I joined that law firm. I was offered the chance to go and do like an LLM, like a law studies in the US. So I went to Washington, D.C., which was just the year of the election of Obama, which was an amazing kind of person and opportunity. I went to listen to him it was just amazing. And then when I came back from the US, I realized that those big law firms, it's a pyramid. and there is not a space for everyone at the top. And therefore, you need to ask yourself, what do I bring to the table that others do not bring? How can I find a space where I do not compete with others? Because there are fewer people that can do stuff that maybe others cannot do. And in my case, what used to be a pain, because being a journeyman is not nice in many respects, became my biggest strength, because I had contacts in different countries, because I understood the culture of different countries, because I spoke different languages. So at the time, what I did is I pushed for the creation of a sports practice at Baker McKenzie that would involve lawyers from different areas of law. So I was doing employment law, but I would have like tax advice, tax lawyer, commercial, M&A, etc. And that's how it all started. That's how I transitioned from being a player to being a lawyer.
That's amazing. And when I listen to you, I can hear almost a sense of renewed hope when you decided to turn into this new direction. And I think also there's something to be said, not only about the thing you mentioned about learning about the people skills as a player, but I think maybe your journey as a journeyman also opened your vision and your view on the world, and being able to understand that having certain qualities and traits in certain areas might be more competitive than in other areas. So like you mentioned, understanding quickly what you could do in the US and maybe the opportunities, but then almost carving out a new niche is more specific to your actual skills, and understanding that if you transfer those to a different place, they might seem more valuable, or you can be able to get more space to grow into, which I think for anyone listening, but also for myself, is something, it's great to hear and understand, because I think sometimes as a football player, and so if I talk about my perspective now, it's something you understanding when it's the right moment to move on, and maybe to change direction, or to place yourself in a different position where you could add more value and maybe grow again. But I think, like you explained now, it's also so applicable across different areas of working or interest or talent or studies or education, but also in life, of understanding when it's the right time to try something new. And also then once you are there, understanding the playing field and understanding where your strengths and weaknesses lie in order to grow more and become more specialized. So I think that it's a great takeaway. And I mean, for me, understanding that and how you did that is something that not only me, but many other football players or athletes could also probably learn from, because I feel you have such a sense of self-identity that are attached to the sport or the discipline that you're into. But sometimes you can also miss the opportunities of understanding that those things that you learn can also be applied in a different way, and maybe need to be repolished, but could be, of a massive strength and power to someone's opportunities moving forward.
That's correct. And the good thing about professional athletes is that we don't see hurdles. So let me explain this. So any normal person. So if you go back to when you started playing, Will, and you think to yourself, what are the odds of me making it as a professional? If you're someone just that thinks about it rationally, you stop tomorrow, because the odds are completely against you. Now, as sports people, we don't see this as what are the hurdles I'm going to be faced. You just see the goal, and you do whatever to pursue that goal. You don't see, and I think that's a big strength that we have as sports people, because we don't see hurdles, we see opportunities, no, and we chase that opportunity, even though the odds on paper are against us. And the other thing I want to stress is, and I'm having a lot of conversation with players right now that are on the brink of retirement, and it's incredible sometimes how insecure they feel about stuff, and I'm like, I just don't understand. So you've got the personality to take a penalty in front of 60,000 people, and you're telling me that you're insecure about, you shouldn't be insecure about anything, because a lot of the guys that you're going to be competing with, they would pay whatever to get the skills that you have, that you've learned in a very kind of intuitive way on the pitch. This resilience, this determination, this making decisions under pressure, this being able to address a wider audience. There's stuff that as a player you don't realize are so valuable. And I'm always amazed when I see them kind of doubting about themselves, and just because they hear someone being academically a bit more polished or having an academic journey that is better than theirs, and I'm like, you're wrong. You've got stuff that are invaluable, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. That resonates, I'm sure, for many of our listeners. We have a large community of current and former footballers who are tuned into this community. So I'm sure that will be really helpful for them, Maheta. And one of the things I wanted to ask about as well was, so you moved from being a sports lawyer to the CEO of Real Mallorca. Like, first of all, how did that all come about, and how did you feel about taking on a CEO role, like the leader, the person who sits at the front and says, I'm at the wheel, I'm accountable, I'm responsible?
So what happened was that I spent about 9 years at Baker McKenzie, including a spell as in-house counsel of Atlético Madrid, which gave me an understanding of high-level football, top agents, top players. What I had not been as a player, I had not discovered that on the legal side. And but I always kept my feet, at Baker. And what happened was, again, going back to this mentality of sports people, at some stage, I saw that the landscape in football was changing in Spain. There was a new TV deal that was around the corner that would mean that the club would basically kind of generate much more income. There was a financial fair play regulation that had just been approved by the league, which meant it was no longer the kind of the Far West. And therefore, I started pitching the idea to invest in Spain to my colleagues in New York, at Baker, New York. And at first they were like, no, please, I mean, what are you talking about? But I'm a very kind of persistent person, and I kept kind of insisting. And at some stage, okay, well, we may have, one of our contacts who are into the investment world, etc. So why don't we make an intro and see how it goes? So those guys basically, called Inner Circle Sports, it's like a boutique investment kind of firm, came to Spain, and I brought them to different clubs, to Espanyol, to Getafe, to different clubs. And at some stage I said, listen, we may have a group of investors that actually would be ready to invest in Spain. And those guys were the owners of the Phoenix Suns. So it was Robert Sarver, Andy Kohlberg, who is the son of the founder of one of the main fund called KKR, and a guy that you guys may know who's called Steve Nash, who was one of the investors. There's also another guy that you guys may know called Stu Holden, great guy who played here in England for Bolton, and he's also a minority kind of investor there. And basically those guys came and decided to buy a club, and they bought Real Mallorca. And again, was I lucky? I think I was. But equally, what a lot of people don't know is that when I started working for Baker, I was from Monday to Friday working as a lawyer. But then I had accepted the role as a scout for Charlton Athletic, because a former teammate of mine, Ben Roberts, was a goalkeeper manager there, said to me, we're looking for a scout at Charlton who can cover Spain, and we don't find anyone. Would you kind of? And I said, I can do that for you. So I was doing that. I mean, it was for peanuts, for nothing. It was actually costing me money to go and watch those games. But the reality was that I spent 4 or 5 years watching third tier, second tier, and a little bit of La Liga. So obviously, when the American came and looked for someone to run a club in second division, I had watched more games than anyone else of that division. I had been to a lot of those stadiums, so I knew the division very well, And if on top of that, I had previously played, if on top of that I spoke Spanish, on top of that my wife is Spanish, on top of that I've got the law degree. So all of a sudden, again, there were a lot of ingredients that, was I the obvious candidate? Absolutely not. I personally think it was a bit of a reckless decision by them, by the way, to give me that job, because I had never been the CEO of anything, let alone my own house. That's the reality of the facts, But it is true that if you put down the job spec of that role, then you see how all of a sudden, I would tick a lot of those boxes that potentially would make me a good candidate for that. So long story short, they ended up kind of offering me the role of CEO, and I joined Real Mallorca at the time in second division in January 2016.
And how did it go, Maheta? How did it go while you were there?
Yeah, I'd love to hear about your first day in office. You walk in.
My first day in office, literally, we basically took over the club. I think it was January the 4th. the club was basically fourth from bottom with a real risk of relegation. The investor basically, welcomed me. There was a press conference, and then they gave me the keys and see you later, basically, And yes, they've been super supportive, but the reality is that the day-to-day, I was on my own in Spain. I was there on my own, and of course they were very supportive. They were interested, but I was there on my own. So first 6 months, we managed to actually stay in the division. But Mallorca was a club with the ambition to go up. So it was not the goal to actually stay in the division. And then the following year, I think I must say that I made a few, I think, bad mistakes, and we ended up getting relegated. So, from going to the club with the idea to getting promoted to La Liga to all of a sudden find yourself in your first experience as CEO in the third tier. And third tier in Spain is not like League One in England. It's 4 groups of 20 clubs, no direct promotion. You need to go through a playoff, and only 4 go up out of 80. So, it's a pretty kind of big task to kind of turn this around. And the same way that I'm telling you that I think I made mistakes that I need to kind of, be accountable for, because I think, for example, on the choice of the manager, which was my choice, I think I should have kind of probably, be more kind of ruthless and probably change earlier, which I did not do, etc. But equally, I think then they gave me the chance to turn things around. And then I think I was brave enough to make tough decisions, unpopular decisions. And then within 2 years, we're back to La Liga. So we did like a 2 back-to-back promotion from third tier to top tier, and I think we're still the only club in the history of Spanish football who would have gone down 1 and then back up straight away 2 consecutively, which was a fantastic, self-discovery for me. I think, as a player, I had failed a lot, probably failed more than I actually had success. But off the field, it was always going positively, Did good grades, got good jobs, good promotion, blah, blah. I never really failed off the field. And all of a sudden, it was tough to accept, it's tough to win every week, but it's very tough to lose every week, And it was a very interesting kind of journey of self-discovery and how resilient I would be, because it was very difficult. It was very difficult to accept that failure,
And when we actually had a conversation a few weeks ago with Matt Porter from the PDC, Professional Darts Committee, and he spoke about his first experience of being CEO at Leyton Orient at 26. And one of the things that was the takeaway for me is that he also mentioned about in the beginning having to learn to almost trust his gut, his intuition about making tough decisions, which then also could be unpopular in order to move his organization forward. So you're explaining those first 6 months, which I can imagine could have been very tough. Maybe also not knowing which voices to trust and to listen to. That must have been a discovery as well, to understand, okay, actually, these are the things I'm going to be held accountable for, and let me do it in my own way. So did you feel that as well, to say, okay, there comes a point where you feel like you can make your own decisions and maybe understand what people can give you expertise-wise, but you have to live and die by the sword, and that's what you have to do. And otherwise you might feel like it's a missed opportunity if you didn't listen to yourself.
Absolutely. I think you discover the loneliness of the decision maker, because ultimately, you try to speak to your wife or to your friends, but ultimately they love you, but they cannot really help you. You can't really talk to the people above you because you're supposed to know what you're doing, and that's why they hired you. So, you can't really talk to them. You don't really have any peers, that you can really trust, because those guys are your competitors. And so it's tough. And then you realize that ultimately, there's a sentence that I think Paul Barber uses a lot, and he says, listen, it's a game of probabilities, You'll get some decisions wrong, and you just need to be comfortable with just making the decision and hoping that the percentage of good decisions is higher than the bad ones, and you need to be able to just do that. At the same time, I would say that one of the things that I learned is that ultimately, to the extent that in football you tend to lose more than you win, then the people that you have around you are absolutely critical. And therefore, for me, what I learned is that I don't work for a club, I work for people. I work for a specific owner, for a specific board. And therefore, this has always then guided my decision in terms of my career. I want to work with people that I trust, that believe in my vision, and that would back me when the bad time would come, because in football it's only a matter of time before you start losing and you start getting in trouble. So more than in any other industry, you definitely need to have people that actually trust you, and therefore you don't pick forcibly a club, you pick an owner or you pick a board. And that's something that I really have front and center ever since then.
So I presume your connection must have been very good with the board and owner. But just to ask a little bit more about how you then built out the team underneath you, how was that progress and process of maybe selecting people in areas of expertise where you might have not have lacked those in order not to waste time, and also having to trust those people and also for them to look up to you and feel like they have your trust to make some decisions which you probably didn't feel maybe were in your realm or your expertise?
It's a very good question. And I think the only person that you cannot cheat is yourself. And therefore, I think you need to be very honest. At least that's my view. You need to be very honest about what you know and what you do not know. And I think that's sometimes the mistake that people do, because they want, listen, if you want to kind of cheat others, fine, but you should not be cheating yourself first and foremost. And I think I've always been someone who is very clear about what I know, which is little, and what I don't know. So I'm very clear as to what I cannot do, And I think in that case, I quickly realized that I'm not a finance person. I'll never be. I can start studying finance every day and night, but I will not be a finance person. So my first hire was a trusted finance person because I needed to complement that, But equally, my second hire was a sporting director, because if I was good at the game, I'd be a coach or sporting director, but I'm not. I'm a CEO, so that's different, So I quickly tried to bring people in that would basically make sure that the core business, which is the game, which is the pitch, would be looked after, So those were my two kind of immediate hires in that specific context at Mallorca, because those were things where I knew were either critical to my success, but equally stuff that I'm not a specialist on, no? And then you follow with communication. So there are other areas, but I think since the day has 24 hours and you cannot change everything at first, you need to understand what are the priority and need to understand what are the biggest gaps that need to be filled in your team. And I think you're right, Will. I think what I discovered thereafter is that a big part of my job is hiring well. If I'm able to hire well, so that's a big difference between when you study and when you work. When you study, you depend on yourself. The more I study, typically, the better grade I get. There's no magic formula, typically. If you study, you get good grades. You can have the odd kind of, but otherwise, it is the way it is. But the more you grow, the more you depend on others. So my success at the PFA, it does not depend on me. It depends on the quality of the people that I have around me, both on a personal level as well as on a professional level.
Maheta, I wanted to fast forward until 2021. So I want to fast forward to 2021 in your career. And I remember at the time, there was so much speculation in the media about who was going to take over from Gordon Taylor, who'd been the head of the union for decades, like such a long time. And Gordon had gone, and who was going to step into that spot? The names being speculated were wide, but there wasn't one name that popped up until the name of the appointee, Maheta. So at the point that your name popped up, everyone's like hitting Google, like, who is this guy? Apart from people who knew Spanish football well, I think Gary Neville was obviously familiar from his time in Spain. But in terms of the British football industry, there was like this huge curiosity. And you walked through the door and I was like, wow, he's black. That's amazing. And other people said many different things. Wow, he's a young guy. How is he going to get on with like the deep politics involved here in British football? Oh man, I'm not sure he knows what he stepped into, et cetera, et cetera. But here you are, and you've got a PFA that has gone through a lot of change, a lot of positive changes and developments. It'll be interesting to hear from you in terms of where you feel it is in terms of how it represents a union that you have a vision for, had a vision for when you walked through the door. But I guess I'm really interested in that first week, because there was a lot going on around the PFA at that time, and we don't need to get into the detail of it, but there was a lot going on. And you stepped through the door and you have the keys again.
Look, I think you're right. I think maybe I was not the candidate that people probably would have betted on, and whoever betted either became very rich or lost everything. But I would say two things. First of all, I think I'm very proud about the way that the PFA went about that, because this was not, mates voting mates. This was not an election. This was not a political campaign. This was a recruitment process. This was a transparent, competitive recruitment process that only looked at what was the job spec and what is the kind of outcome that needs to happen, and that's one of the things that attracted me to the role. So it was a headhunter calling saying the PFA is looking for a new chief exec. Would you like to be part of the process? There was a process run by non-football people of a top level, people who have worked for Amazon Web Services, people who have worked at TikTok, but equally people who had experience in football, because it was a combination of being interviewed by the players board, so people elected by the members at different level to actually represent them, alongside a group of non-football people of a top standard. And that's what attracted me. I didn't want to go to a place where it was just a question of mates voting. No. It was a question of, are you the most suitable candidate for that role? And if so, then that could be the outcome. So that's something I'm very proud in terms of what the PFA has done, because I've then subsequently applied that very same kind of mantra throughout my time at the PFA. There's not a single person at the PFA that has been picked just because I knew that person. To the opposite, I would say none of the people I've hired I knew before. It was all about advertisement, job spec, competition, panels. Whoever prevails. If he's black, white, Asian, gay, straight, it does not matter. Whoever is the most suitable person gets the job, and that's nice. And I think that I'm very proud of, and I think that's a good starting point if you want to regenerate an organization and be credible. The other thing I would say is the fact that I was a candidate from the outside, so to say, meant that I don't have any mortgage to repay to anyone in England. There's no one that I really need to please, or that I should be kind of concerned about upsetting. I'm just going to be doing what I think is right. I'm passionate about my job. I'm passionate about helping players. And if people want to go on a journey with that, fantastic. And if not, I'll take whatever measures needs to be taken to defend the interest of the people I need to defend. And that's something that I think a few people are not used to, because they were used to, if I do this, what will this mean for my career? And listen, I'll do whatever I do. If I need to go back to Spain, I'll go back to Spain and do something different, So I'm here because I care. I'm here because I'm passionate and because I want to do the right thing. And I think this has given me a huge advantage, because I didn't have to all the time being thoughtful about what would Leon think, what would Will think. I just do what the role requires, full stop, And that's what seemed to be at first potentially a disadvantage became my biggest strength, of not having to respond to anyone other than my members, my board, and that's it. No other kind of mortgages to repay to anyone, no?
And Maheta, what would you say you're most proud of in terms of the changes that you've brought into the organization? Because the PFA has changed. I think 100% it has changed. It's kind of maintained that sense of tradition that was very important to the previous CEO, but certainly there's been a modernization. You can feel your presence in terms of the shape of the organization. So what would you say you're most proud of?
Look, the PFA has always been an amazing organization, and what Gordon, I mean, like every human being, Gordon may have had these flaws and may have kind of a thing, but you need to acknowledge that what the PFA has achieved as an institution over the years is just amazing, And today, believe it or not, I was on the England camp and I was having a meeting with the leadership group, and I was talking to Harry Kane, and he was saying, in Germany, if you get injured, they cover you like, I think 6 weeks or whatever. After that, you need to take an insurance or whatever. And I was saying to him, well, in England, because we have a standard contract negotiated by the PFA, you're covered, mate. And that's where people realize, wow. And I was saying to him, we shouldn't be taken for granted that the standard contract just fell from the sky. That was the result of a negotiation, and you need to give credit to people who have achieved that you as a player don't need to go and fight for what happens if I get injured tomorrow, because it will be covered. So I think what I'm most proud of is, I think there was no doubt that the PFA was, I think, an important institution in England, but I think we had somehow, lost contact sometimes with the members, and I think you need to be out there, you need to meet them, you need to create a relationship, and need to be a place where people feel confident to turn to for, not just to ask for help, but also if I've got an idea, if I've got to something that is about kind of growing and improving, etc. And I hope that by now the PFA is not just a place where you turn to when you've got a problem, but equally a place where you turn to when you've got an idea, when you want to create your foundation, when you want to do something because you want to study, or because you want to grow, because you want to develop. No, and I think I want to believe that over the last 4 or 5 years, I think we have hopefully strengthened that credibility, and that players see us as a trusted place to be able to turn, because we could do something for them, not just in case of necessity or urgency, but also a bit more widely,
And I think just because your honesty and your approach is so refreshing, one of the things that I read about, and of course I was part of the PFA for a while when I was in the UK, and like you said, certain things which are taken for granted, which have, like you said, been negotiated, but also, the way you look forward, one of the things I wanted to also bring up was about the player support and the welfare, and also the parts of the mental health that maybe is something that isn't something offered consistently or even suggested. It might be a case where players will come to the PFA when they are already in a tight spot. But I think, I would love to hear more about what your plan is with that for the PFA, and also being able to help players understand that is an accessibility that is there for everyone, not just for the top end, and something that we might read in the news, different cases with players that go through difficult moments, but also the lower end of the football pyramid where that could be just as prevalent, maybe more sense of pressure, uncertainty, and players maybe not feeling that they can get the support the same way that other players do if they are all of a sudden missing for 2 matches. And obviously everyone's going to ask how they are and what they're up to and what's happening. So I'd love to hear more about that and what the PFA is doing as one of its pillars moving forward and under your leadership.
I think that traditionally, what you know is that the PFA is working with Sporting Chance, and if you get to that extreme where you do have a need to kind of step away for a few weeks, then there would be that provision, which by the way is amazing, to be able to go into a rehab center for a certain period of time, and this is something that again very few other unions offer elsewhere in the world. But I think again the world has evolved, and I think we're all discovering that there's something in between low mood and being addicted and having to go into rehab, the space there that you need to be able to support people, because not because you're at the extreme of having to go to rehab that you don't need help. And therefore, I think what we've been working on is almost develop our own network of therapists so people can turn to us and they don't need to wait until they're at a stage where, it's do or die. No, you can do something before that. You can, and I think, what I also learned is that it's we spend so much kind of resources on our physical kind of well-being and all types of machines, but ultimately, if the main machine, which is your head and your brain and your mind, is not at the level, you cannot perform. You cannot perform. And again, that's where maybe the journeyman in me, because I've been through that. I know what it means to be injured. I know what it means to be benched, to think that you're going to be the next big thing, and then before you know, you're out of the squad. I've been through that, so I don't need to be told. And I think this gives you, a different way of engaging with players. It's not the same when you talk to someone, you speak the same language, because I understand what you go through. I've been there as well. So hopefully this is what I think has given us a different kind of relationship with the players over the years.
And you touched on it as well, because you mentioned about football having so many more negative sensations and feelings than positive, maybe especially if you look further down than the top 1% of the players who are winning consistently, maybe playing consistently and playing for the trophies and having all the maybe more success than the downside. But even those, they will also be dealing with different types of pressures and things that they will be dealing with. But it's great to hear. And I think definitely your understanding and of having that experience yourself, which, in some cases, like you said, people might say, okay, well, you are a football person. In this case, has turned into your edge to be able to understand and really focus on things which are not as tangible as the situations where you say it's people are really in the red zone or in the do or die, and way before, just having them understand, and especially maybe also for younger players who don't necessarily have that support network, to be able to go and overcome those difficult situations and moments which everyone goes through during a career, whether it be in sport, but maybe more obvious and public when you are a football player.
And that's another skill that, so a lot of people think, not us who are in the industry, but people outside of it think that ultimately those who make it to the top are the most talented. And I don't know, Leon and Will, what your experience is, but my experience is that typically it's not the case. It's not the ones who are the most talented. It's typically the ones who are the best crisis managers. Those are the ones who are able to manage better the various crises that they have during their career, maybe because they get dropped, because they get injured, because there are a number of reasons for which, even if you're very good, you face crises. And to me, what I've seen is that those who make it to the very top are those who are very good at that. Setback, recover, move on. Setback, leave it behind, move on. That's mentality of being able to continue relentlessly, to just go forward. Even if it rains, they continue. It rains, the wind blows, it doesn't matter. They continue. And that's another incredible thing that we as athletes have, which
and is that something that the PFA is trying to help players also understand and maybe train as a skill, which is not necessarily something you would get from a S&C coach or your main manager?
Absolutely. Life is tough, Will. There is no, it is what it is. And there's an element of resilience that needs to be built into people's personality, and I think sometimes nowadays we navigate that fine line between, mental well-being issues and just accepting that life is difficult. And there's an element of resilience that you need to build, and sometimes when I see my kids who, at school, there's no longer grades. It's about colors and, and green and yellow and pink and whatever. And I'm like, at some stage, I lost my first game 17-2. So the first game ever that I played, I lost 17. 17-2. And look, what it meant for me? It meant that the feeling I had that day, I was like, I don't want to experience this ever again, and that just drove me, and made me progress. Now, don't get me wrong. Different people have different needs. It's not a one size fits all. And it's important to understand that as well. I think we've evolved as a society and we understand that not everyone has the same needs. And there'll be people who need to be kind of handled more carefully, and that's important. But there's an element of resilience that need to be built into each of us, because that's the secret recipe of being at that level, of commitment and demand.
Maheta, you and I have got to know each other pretty well through our discussions around equity, diversity, inclusion. The PFA have always been leading the way in this. I mean, they were the first organisation to support the kick racism out of football campaign back in 1993. Up to very recently, the WSL2 players, the women in the second division here in England, are now supported by the PFA. So that's a very recent development. I can say personally, with the football blacklist, Simone Pound, who I hope is listening, in your team, was the first to support the football blacklist that I deliver. So the PFA is always there at the front when it comes to representing everybody. I'd like to shift that into leadership now in terms of representation at the very top, because yourself, Maheta, you're one of the very few black leaders in the senior corridors of football here in the UK. We know we have a challenge with the lack of black managers. There's only been 11 in the Premier League's history since it started. So in terms of like the union and the work that it's doing in this space of representation, how important is it to ensure that all the members see the pathways to leadership positions in the game, be that as a coach, as a manager, but also as a CEO like yourself?
Look, my vision on this topic is very clear. I think events such as the football blacklist, events such as the best of Africa, that's what I think needs to happen, in the sense that there's a part of our role which is to basically, denounce and raise the flag about certain type of behavior and go for it. Okay, fine. But I think I don't want to give airtime to people who do not deserve even my attention. I want to focus more on the positive stories. I want to focus on motivating, on elevating people who do well, to say, well, listen, you know what? Even if you don't believe in diversity, it will actually make you win. It will actually make you grow as a company. It will make you, because, and I think I accept that out of 10 people, there'll be 3, whatever number that are just hopeless. Listen, those guys will go after them if they behave badly or report that thing, but I don't want to be the police. I want to encourage people to identify those people, raise the flag, and let them be punished. But I want to spend the rest of my time in inspiring, elevating, and giving positive reason to people to believe in diversity. And that's what has been, I think, our focus at the PFA. Can we demonstrate that diversity is actually good? That even if you don't believe in it, actually, and you only think about the outcome and the results, this will be good for you. And I'm really kind of obsessed about opportunities to demonstrate that, and talk about success stories that would kind of, inspire and change the narrative. And that's what we've been doing. This goes from the player to coach scheme, which is a fantastic scheme that gives people from underrepresented group the chance to actually become a coach at a league club. We've now launched a player to referee scheme, where we want to give a pathway for players to become kind of referees. So I think it is about thinking about those opportunities to let people shine. And I think my belief is that people don't need a favor. They need an opportunity. I don't want to be the CEO of the PFA because I'm black. No, I want to be the CEO of the PFA because I'm the most suitable person for that role. And if I happen to be black, fantastic, but I don't want any favor. I just want an opportunity. And I think I'm very conscious of the fact that ultimately I am the ambassador of people who look and sound like me. And I've got a responsibility to try to do as well as I can to keep that door open for other people after me, and I'm very kind of conscious of that every day and every time that I've got the opportunity to address people or to talk to people.
Yeah, Maheta, just to understand that, because of course you spoke about your own position and not wanting to have any favors. And I love what you mentioned about being able to best qualified and just the opportunity, which is the key thing really, for whoever is the best, regardless of their background or ethnicity. But also, your own journey has been almost self-carved, because at the time to study and to become so well educated as you are has obviously led to you being qualified throughout this journey, which you didn't aim to be, head of the PFA or CEO at Real Mallorca, to these opportunities presenting itself. So I know that the PFA offers a lot of different ways for players to develop themselves and further themselves. But how much of that emphasis do you put on the education part, and also creating further opportunities for current players, and not only for players that are really in a moment of transition or past players, to really help them understand that there is more after this journey that we see living week to week, trying to play football or playing football, and what is the vision for PFA moving forward, especially seeing your own experience and maybe trying to break that down and making that more open and accessible for other players who might not necessarily have that mindset of filling in their January and June off-season time to take exams somewhere else in Europe, or making it easier accessible.
To be honest with you, it's something that, I'm not sure what I can say I'm obsessed about, but close to obsessed about. No, I think what is clear to me, and what, again, going back to what I was telling you about my father, I think the one thing that he always told me is that education is the way where, you can compete against anyone, irrespective of how well connected or wealthy they are. That's the only thing where you compete. You can compete with anyone if you have education. And that's one thing. And the second thing is that ultimately, one of the sad part about my job is when you go into those important rooms and tables and you see very few people actually understand the game. who actually care about the game. And I think there's a desperate need in football to have more truly football people who actually care and understand the game around the key decision maker tables. That's really a necessity that football has right now, because we talk about everything but about football, but about the product. This would be like Apple talk about everything but the new iPhone. It's crazy, but this is happening right now as we speak in football. And therefore, I think it's critical that the players gain the education that is needed to be able to be around those tables, because it's not enough to say that I was a good player, a top player, I played for national team, blah, blah. It's just not good enough, because having been a Ballon d'Or winner does not turn you forcibly into a good executive, at all. It's a different job. You need to relearn everything. Now, the fact that you've been a Ballon d'Or winner or whatever, or a top player, means that if you can couple that with education, then you're unbeatable, because you got everything that you need to be successful, whether within football or outside of football. So one of the projects I'm the most proud of is the launch of the PFA Business School, which is basically a school that is aimed at providing players with the tools to have like a job thereafter. So this goes from, a 2-year level 7 course certified by the Portsmouth University to become an executive, to a 2-year course that will lead you to become a sporting director, to course around emotional intelligence, data and analytics, EDI, communication. So we've really created, a suite of courses that would basically enable players to study. And I think because of my own experience struggling to study whilst I was playing, all those courses are basically tailored to the needs and the schedules of the players. So it would be late afternoon, early evening. It would be not recorded session, but rather live online session, coupled with a few kind of in-person session, because I think we're not very good at networking football as players, but we need to understand that this is very important. So we have those in-person sessions to encourage them to network, etc. So it's very much tailored to the need and schedule of the players. Even in terms of the content, players are used to learn on the job. So therefore, we have very practical sessions. So it's Steve Parish coming and telling you about how he handles his board. Is Thiago Pinto coming and telling you what he did at AS Roma. Is Monchi coming and telling you what he did at Seville. But equally, it's Dougie Freeman telling you how he's recruiting at Palace, So those type of experiences that are real life experience that people come and share with you, So yeah, that's what we've done. It's going fantastically well. I mean, I'm amazed to think that we've got 400 plus players registered. This goes from, Ilkay Gundogan to Jordan Henderson, to Johan Wissa, to Tyrone Mings, to Robbie Fowler, to McManaman. So it's. I was optimistic, but I never thought there'd be that level of interest in the PFA Business School.
Yeah, that was my question about the appetite for that, because I could have imagined when you roll this out, maybe some people being skeptical. But yeah, like you said, if it's, so great. I mean, when you were explaining to me there now, I was already thinking about where I could go online to try and sign up for next season. But yeah, I can imagine that that there was a lot of interest, but I'd love to hear what the appetite is. And also, yeah, you already alluded to it with the 400 players. But how you also see that maybe for some younger players early in their career to already get involved with, and also maybe for them to understand that the opportunity is there.
So what we've done is, we initially started with those postgraduate courses, and then we realized that there was a group of players, probably between, 19 and 23 that actually, wanted to study as well, and so we put together a degree. So we put together a 3-year sports management degree. That means that in England as of today, someone could seamlessly play football at professional level without stopping to study. So you could be at an EFL club, you do the BTEC, you finish the BTEC or A levels, you get into the sports management degree of 3 years, you finish that, you get into the postgraduate to become an executive. And you do not stop for 1 second to play football, which is something, I hope would stay irrespective of what I do next as a tangible kind of legacy of what we're trying to achieve.
Well, Maheta, I can say I can endorse the PFA Business School fully. as someone who has been a tutor on the course and delivered as part of it. And also, I am Dr. Leon Mann when I'm at Portsmouth University, because I have an honorary doctorate at the University of Portsmouth, where I studied many, many, many years ago. So I'm a big fan of that collaboration and can see the impact of the work that you're doing there, and have many friends who've gone through that school. One of the curiosities I have around the job that you have is around stakeholder management, and at times, I guess, conflict management, because the biggest card any union has is industrial action. Now, if there was to be industrial action, which for the PFA would be the biggest card, would be the players don't turn up on a Saturday, right? That would be absolutely huge. It would bring a massive business to a standstill. But that's the biggest card you could play if you felt, or your members rather, felt really, really strongly about something. But then equally, as a union, it's got this quite unique setup where the money from the television deal via the Premier League kind of comes into the PFA and is kind of, if you like, the biggest pot of money. And hopefully I'm not misrepresenting that, but I'm just trying to put it into very simple terms for our listeners to understand. So it creates this quite like unusual dynamic between a union and the clubs and employers. However, we know that we have big issues in the game. We know that the players are quite rightly demanding of their employers, and their employers don't always behave themselves. That's why it's important to have such a strong union. So I'm interested in just how you manage that stakeholder management with the other leaders around the table, and importantly, when things go wrong with the clubs for your members, how you can kind of ensure that you are a strong union and you're never compromised.
It's a very good question, and the reality is that the beauty and difficulty of this job is that ultimately in football you all need each other. So you can fall out up to a certain point, but we all need each other. The players need the club needs the players need the refs, the refs need. So we all need each other. We all need to sometimes agree to disagree, but ultimately we are condemned in a way to actually all be together around that table, because we all at some stage need each other. Now, the approach that I have taken to this role is to say there are two ways to look at this. You either look at stuff that are different from others, or you say, what do we actually have in common? Do we actually have common enemies, or do we have common kind of fights? And what I found is we have much more common enemies than stuff that actually make us kind of butt heads, and on the calendar, we go hand in hand with the club. In fact, we are happy to do stuff that maybe politically the league or the club cannot do. I have no problem if I need to kind of file a lawsuit against any other international organization, because it's my job. And maybe that's something that the Premier League or the club don't want to, which I understand why they would be careful about not doing it, on the calendar, on the online abuse. So there are a number of topics where, we discover that we have stuff in common, that, we can complement each other, we can help each other. Obviously, sometimes, as it is the case now, maybe with this, idea of a salary cap, you need to disagree, and you disagree strongly, and you need to be ready to take whatever measure to defend the rights of your members. But I do believe that we have a lot of things in common with the clubs, and we can actually work together. So if I'm honest with you, I've only had really one significant kind of source of tension since I joined the PFA, which is this discussion around the salary cap. But for the rest, we have found that we have a lot of things in common, and that we can work together, which has been good, because also maybe the fact that I've been to the club as well puts me in a different situation, because I've been in their shoes. I understand what they're going through. I understand I'm not a union rep of the 18th century and with my fist up. No, that's hopefully I'm a bit of a different profile of organization. We are a bit of a different organization.
Amazing. And Maheta, I guess a final question from us would be around the theme of this is obviously power and purpose. So at the moment, in your role as the CEO of the PFA, you have power in your hands. How do you want to use that power going forward?
Wisely, I hope. And I think the goal is to to try to make the players understand that ultimately they are the product, and without the product you don't have anything, and I think the fact that they are front and center of this industry means that they have the ability to drive change on and off the field. And I think that's what I'd love them to be able to harness. That this understanding that they are not just the ones who go out there and play on Sunday, but they've got an unbelievable platform to change football for the better, but equally to impact society, because we live in a peer-to-peer society where my kids listen to peers. They listen to people that they actually admire, and I think those are the players nowadays. So that's what I think, what I hope that we can use our power and influence for going forward.
Maheta, thank you so much for your time this evening. We really, really appreciate your insight into your own leadership, your own journey, and what the future can look like as well. We thank you for all you're doing for all the players across the PFA. And to those listening, please do subscribe, share, comment, tell a friend, come and join our Power and Purpose community around leadership in sport, business, and beyond. This has been Power and Purpose with me, Leon Mann, Troost-Ekong, and Maheta Molango. Thank you so much for your time, and goodbye.
Thank you.